Happy Tuesday, friends. Let's correct our workbook page. We're correcting workbook page 151. Workbook page, you had to add fractions. Number 1, you should have gotten 3/4. Number 2, 5/8. 3, 9/10. Number 4, 2/4. And you could have reduced it down to 1/2. That would have been the simplest form. We'll talk about that today, finding the simplest form. But you could have just written 2/4. The simplest form for number 4 would have been 1/2. But we didn't talk about that yet, so we'll talk about it today. 5 would have been 2/10. The simplest form would have been 1/5. Number 6, 2/5. 7 is 5/6. Number 8, 7/8. Number 9, 8/10. The simplest form would be 4/5. Number 10 was 7/12. 11, 6/8, or the simplest form is 3/4. Number 12, 4/7. Number 13 is 5/7. 14, 8/10. And number 15 is 5/8 of a yard. Okay, let's look at our lesson for today. It's 12.9. You're going to subtract fractions today. So it's pretty much the same thing we did with adding fractions, but now today we're subtracting them. It's on workbook page 402 and 403. Please turn there now. Pause the video and turn there now. Okay, 12.9, subtract fractions. On page 402, it gives you the example problem. And it says, Matthew ran 3/10 of a mile. Charlie ran 1/10 of a mile. How much further did Matthew run than Charlie? So here's the subtraction problem. It's 3/10 minus 1/10. So you're finding out how much further Matthew ran than Charlie, because Matthew ran 3/10, Charlie ran 1/10, so you're going to subtract them. And here's how you do it. Like we did yesterday, you can, as long as the denominators are the same, you can keep them the same and just subtract the two numbers. You can also see it on a strip. I have this strip like in your book. 3 of them are shaded because that's the number total that you started with. And you want to get rid of one of them. You're going to subtract one out. You just cross it off and you find how many are left. And you can also do it on a number line. If you started at 3/10, right here, if you started there, and you want to move one of the tenths back. So you start at 3/10 and you jump back, you would end up with 2/10. Same up here. We keep our denominators the same. So it's tenths on the bottom. You subtract 3 minus 1 and you get the 2/10. Let's look at the 2/10 and talk about simplest form here. Let me erase all this and we'll talk about it. So your answer was 2/10, and that is correct. But when you're talking about in simplest forms, 2/10 can be reduced. And to reduce it, there are a couple ways that you can do it. One, you can look at your fraction strips. So let's look at those really quickly, and then I'll teach you how to do it mathematically. Okay, so you look at the tenths on your fraction strips. There's 1/10 and 2/10. You follow that up, and you see it matches perfectly with 1/5. So 2/10 is the same amount as 1/5 on your fraction line. Now, mathematically looking at this, we can also do it if we don't have our fraction strips. And to do that, you have to kind of think about dividing. If you're going to divide, you're going to think about what number can I divide both of these two numbers by equally. And this way, it takes a little bit of practice. It's kind of hard. It doesn't come easy. It takes a lot of practice in knowing your multiplication tables pretty well. But if you think that I can divide both by 2, 2 times 1 will give you 2, and 2 times 5 would give me 10. So you could divide them both by 10, and you would have 2 divided by 2 equals your 1, and your 10 divided by 2 would equal your 5. Since they're both can be divided by 2 equally, 1 over 5 is the smallest. Now you know this is the smallest form because 1 cannot be reduced to anything else. Sometimes you'll reduce them and divide them by a number, and then it can still be done again by a different number. So if it can be done again by a different number, that's not the simplest form. It only is the simplest form until you cannot divide it down any smaller. If you get a 1, you know that's the smallest. We'll practice a couple more as we go through your textbook today. Okay, so let's look at number 1. Let's look at subtracting some, and then we'll talk more about the simplest form. So number 1 on page 403, it says 7/10, and you're subtracting 2/10. And it wants to know what that equals. Now remember, you can do a strip, you can do a number line, and you can just subtract since your denominators are the same. You carry over the same denominator and you subtract 7 minus 2, and it would be 5. Now let's reduce. 5/10 is the correct answer, but it can be reduced down to a simpler form, a simpler number, a smaller numbered fraction. What number can both 5 and 10 be divided by that it would come out equally? It could be done by 1, but you would get the same answer. 5 divided by 1 is 1. It couldn't be divided by 2, because 2 times a different number would not give you 5. It has to be done equally. 3 times any number would not equal 5, and 4 times any number would not equal 5. But 5 times a number would equal 5. 5 times 1 equals 5. And how about 10? Can we divide 10 by 5? Yes, we could, because 5 times 2 would equal 10. So, since they both share this factor, we can divide both by the number 5. 10 divided by 5 equals 2, because 2 times 5 equals 10. And 5 can be divided by 5, and that's 1, because 1 times 5 is 5. So this can be reduced down to 1/2. That's the simplest form, 1/2. I know it might be really confusing, and we'll look at them again. We'll do it some more. You can look on your fraction strips too. Do you want me to show you on your fraction strips? I'll show you that one on the fraction strips. Okay, so we had 5/10. So you look at your tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You carry that up, and it's the same amount as 1/2. Okay, let's look at number 2. 6/9 minus 2/9. Okay, it has the same denominator. Let's carry it over. 6 minus 2 equals 4. Now there isn't a number that's going to equal, they don't share a factor. So you can't divide 4 by any of the same numbers that you can divide 9 by and get the answer. Because the factors of 3, what I mean by factors is what numbers can you multiply them by? Remember that vocabulary word for multiplication. A factor is a number that you multiply to get the product of 9. So the factors of 9 would be 1 times 9. 2 doesn't work. 3 times 3 is 9. And those are the only factors. Those are the only numbers that you can multiply by to get 9. Let's talk about 4. The factors that you can multiply to get 4. Well, you could multiply 1 times 4. And you could multiply 2 times 2, right? The only factor that 1 and 9 share is 1. And if you divided them by 1, it would be the same answer. So this is already, 4/9 is already in the simplest form. It's already the simplest form. If you were to look on the fraction strips, you couldn't find one that would be the same exact amount as 4/9. Okay, let's move on. Number 3. 4/6 minus 3/6 equals, well, it has the same denominator, so let's carry it over and subtract our top numbers. 4 minus 3 is 1. Since there's a 1 up there, we already know that it's in its simplest form, 1/6. Let's go to number 4. 7/12 minus 4/12. Okay, let's carry over our denominator and subtract our numerators. 7 minus 4 equals 3. 3/12. Now let's think about those factors. What factors, what numbers times each other, would give you these products? So what are the factors of 3? What numbers can you multiply? Well, you can multiply 1 and 3, but there aren't any other numbers besides 1 and 3. Now let's look at 12. What are the factors that would multiply to get 12? 1 and 12 for sure. What are some other ones? Can you multiply it by 2 and something? 2 times what equals 12? 6. And there's another one. What two numbers would equal 12? 3 times 4. 3 times 4 equals 12. So those are also factors. Now if you look at 1 and 3 for the factors of 3 and the factors for 12, you have 3 that matches. So that tells you can divide 3 by 3 and 12 by 3 to get the lowest or simplest form. So let's do that. Three divided by 3 equals 1. And 12 divided by 3 equals 4. So the simplest form would be 1/4. I'll show you on your fraction strips. So you had 3/12. 1, 2, 3. You follow that line up, and it's the same as 1/4. Okay, keep going. Number 5. 6/8 minus 4/8 equals, let's carry over our denominator because it is the same. Subtract our numerators, 6 minus 4, and that equals 2. Okay, let's think about our factors. What can we multiply 2, 1, and 2? And what can we multiply to get 8? Well, 1 and 8 for sure. You can always, that's 1 and the number itself is always 2 of the factors that you can get right away. But you can also multiply 8 by 2 and 4. And look, the 2's match. So you can divide 2/8 by 2 to find the simplest form. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 1/4 is the simplest form. Please try number 6. Pause the video and please try number 6 on your own. Okay, number 6. Number 6 is 3/3 minus 1/3 equals, we carry over our denominator, 3 minus 2, or 3 minus 1 is 2. They're not going to share any factors besides just the number 1, so we know it's in the simplest form. The factors for 2 are 1 and 2, and the factors for 3 are 1 and 3. So 1 is the common factor, so you know it's already in the simplest form, because if you divided them by 1, 2 divided by 1 is 2, and we already have a 2, and 3 divided by 1 is 3, we already have that, 2/3. If you followed on your fraction strips, you wouldn't find an equivalent smaller fraction than 2/3. Okay. I would like you to try 7 and 8. Pause the video and try 7 and 8, and then we'll talk about it when you're done. Okay, 7. It says write a subtraction sentence to represent each model. So your subtraction sentence should say how many you started with total. And you can see that the strip was broken up into 9 pieces. So you know 9 is going to be your denominator numbers. You start with, and how many are shaded purple altogether? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You start with 5/9. So that should be your first fraction on your number sentence. 5/9 minus, and 2 of those are x'd out. So you're subtracting 2 of the 9ths. And it's going to equal, how many are left of the shaded purple? 3/9. Now you are able to reduce this to a simpler form. Let's talk about it. Your factors for 1 or for 3 are 1 and 3. There are no other numbers that you can multiply together to get the answer 3. Your factors for 9 are always 1 and the number itself, so 1 and 9. And there's one more factor that equals 9. It's 3 and 3. So you don't write the number 3 twice, you just write it once. And you can see 3 is a common factor, so you can divide them both by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. And 9 divided by 3 is 3. So the simplest form is 1/3 for number 7. Number 8. This is a number line. You had to do it on there. So you should have started with 4/4 because that's where you started on the number line. And then you see it skip backwards. You see 1, 2, 3 times it skipped backwards. So it skipped back minus 3 of the fourths. And it left you with, and the arrow's pointing there, at the 1/4. There's 1 in the numerator, so it is in the smallest form. You can only have 1 times 1 equal 1, and you don't want to divide by 1 because it gives you the same answer. So we already know that 1/4 is its simplest form. Okay, please watch the Khan Academy videos for this lesson. It should help you a little bit too with simplest form and subtracting. And then do your workbook page, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.